Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I have an absolutely special guest for this interview. He probably does not need any introduction, I'm sure, for people who are listening to this or watching this on YouTube. This is Jeremy Lee, of course, also known as Sports Card Live to many people in the hobby. And if you don't know Jeremy, all I can say is shame on you. I don't think you're probably someone who's been a true hobbyist or collector without coming across Jeremy's channel at some point. But first of all, Jeremy, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much for doing this interview this morning.
Thank you for having me, Kurt. It's nice to be with you to chat.
Absolutely. And first of all, let's just go back to what kind of got you in the hobby. What got you interested in collecting, and what are some of the things that you've always enjoyed collecting and still enjoy collecting?
I mean, I think back to elementary school and being a kid, and I had my Atari 2600, but I also used to go to the corner store and pick up packs of hockey cards and baseball cards and basketball cards for 25 cents a pack, and I was always about completing the sets back in the early 80s through all of the 80s. And those are my earliest memories. Trading at recess, I had my couple of friends that were into it with me, and again, it was all about completing that set every year. Taking my $2 a week allowance, that would get me 8 packs. I mean, that was the best day of the week. That was my highlight as a kid. And then, as I went through and graduated high school at the end of the 90s, had a few more bucks, could build those sets quicker. I remember in grade 12, I actually built several sets and then sold them in school for, I don't know if it was $10 or $15 a set for the 88, 89 O-Pee-Chee hockey set with the Brett Hull rookie. So those are some of my earlier memories, and I've just never stopped.
Is there a particular set that's your favorite from that? Was there one that was your favorite when you were a kid, and is it still your favorite, or is there something else that's your favorite now?
I love all the sets from of hockey O-Pee-Chee from 1978 right through till the 89 set. I
Hmm.
love how the designs are so different each year, which nowadays, I can't tell a Topps flagship from a Panini Prism from an Upper Deck. They all look the same to me. Upper Deck Hockey's flagship series. So if I had to pick out a favorite from back then, I loved when the 84-85 set came out because number one, it had Steve Eiserman's rookie in it, who was an amazing player right from his rookie year. But it also had that little headshot in the bottom corner of the card, similar to the way I think it's 83 Topps Baseball did. The Sandberg and Gwynn year, where you have the action shot filling up the main canvas of the card, and then in the bottom corner you had just a headshot. And I just loved, for the first time, you were getting two different pictures on the front of a card, and I thought that was really cool. So maybe the 84 is my favorite from a design perspective, but it's I like a lot of those sets from that era.
What was it like trying to find OPG products back then in Canada? How I mean, was it very similar to how products were distributed in America? And were there a ton of hobby shops in the area that you lived in, or was it primarily just trying to find them in certain retail shops?
I mean, in the 80s, where I grew up, which was in Winnipeg, so just north of North Dakota, um, there were a couple of hobby shops locally for me. One of them was called Abdi Cards, and it was the shop back then where I lived. Finding O-Pee-Chee cards at the corner at the local drugstore or 7-Eleven was easy. They were everywhere. You could find them at hockey arenas. You could find them, like when I went to swimming lessons at the swimming pool facility. You could find them in the canteens. They were everywhere. There was no shortage of finding them back in the 80s.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't sure. I mean, and that sounds very similar to, yeah, finding your typical baseball card set in the United States in the '80s in that same time period. You like, yeah, you can go into toy stores, retail, all kinds of retail stores to find them, and it was just so much different back then than it is now. Although I wonder how things are going to change with Fanatics kind of taking over most of the licenses, and where we'll start to see some of those distributions going forward.
I agree with you. I think with their chain of lid stores and just their omnipresence on the internet, I think we'll see lots of evolution. You know, we call it change. It's change for sure, but it's also evolution. And it's one of those things where in the hobby, we have a lot of people who are sort of stubborn and adverse to change. And I think it's just kind of like, don't get left behind one way or another. If you can stick to your traditions, and there's certainly value to that and enjoyment to that. But it's like anybody with any sort of evolution in even technology. Like, you can be a technological luddite, you can be a hobby luddite. It just depends how you want to embrace the ever changing landscape of the hobby and the technology within.
Yeah, and we just got news just the other day of Fanatics doing their own streaming platform site, starting to do breaks and whatnot on their own streaming platform, almost as if they're trying to potentially squeeze out some of the other streaming platforms that have come up in the hobby recently. And further goes into, it seems like Fanatics wants to really take a stronghold on all the different aspects of the hobby going forward. At least that's what it seems like so far. I mean, you have much more of an insider knowledge than a lot of people do. What do you think? What do you think are things going to look like going forward when it comes to distributing out products, being able to find uh, both sealed products and single cards on secondary markets and things of that nature going forward?
I mean, if Fanatics is going to use the same methodologies within their sports collectibles vertical that they do in their other verticals and product lines, then yeah, I think that they're going to try to capture more of the margins that are now being shared between the various levels of distribution in the hobby. Seems like everybody needs to make money in the hobby, right from the manufacturer all the way to the collector, with about 5 or 6 steps in between. So if they're going to try to capture that for themselves, that's great, but they can only really, I think, they can only really do it on the products that they are manufacturing moving forward. There's,
Hmm.
people say that I've heard people make comments like, Fanatics is going to ruin the hobby, and I'm paraphrasing from various narratives that I've seen. But keep in mind that there's 130 years of hobby body of work that we've already had. They can't change what's been done in the past. And yeah, you might not get to buy your 2023 basketball, football, or baseball product the way you used to, or your 2024 product, but you can still go into a local card shop and choose from 130 years worth of sports cards. Or if you're being realistic, like back even 110 back to the 1910s. So I don't think that they can change the complete hobby, but they can definitely change the distribution of products that have yet to come out, and we'll see how that works. And then if they're going to try to, build a marketplace or acquire a marketplace, like if they were to acquire the collectibles division of eBay, or if they were to acquire ComC, or if they were to acquire PWCC or Golden Auctions or one of these major platforms, then now they've got some control over the historical body of the hobby. But I like to keep in mind that I don't, even if they do that, I can still go into an LCS and buy a single. I can still go to a card show and buy a single from the from
Right.
the past. Their real power is over the future. And to me, the future for me at my age is, about a quarter, a fifth of the history of the hobby. So I'm not so concerned about it. I'm also not an ultra modern buyer. I don't break a lot of product. So
Right.
for me personally, I'm not even concerned for the overall hobby and the future growth of the hobby. I think that they have it in their best interest to make the hobby last a long time and be as accessible to as many people as possible. So while it may be naive, I'm gonna just and I have no control over it, so I'm just gonna put my hope into Fanatics, that they will do right by the hobby. And if that doesn't happen, there's still 120 years worth of stuff to go back and collect.
Right. And that's the great thing about the hobby, obviously, is that you have all kinds of collectors collecting all kinds of things, and you can go back over 100 years and like my focus basically is like vintage basketball. So whatever happens with Fanatics and products going forward, I'm still just going to collect vintage basketball primarily, and
Mhm.
it's probably not going to really concern me one bit. And the people that I interact with and deal with on a regular basis, life will go on as normal for most of us that deal with the older products for sure. So, so there's all kinds of things you can get into with this hobby and all kinds of passions that you can kind of focus on, and some of that may uh, be impacted with what happens with Fanatics going forward, but a lot of it probably won't, and it probably will be sort of regular business as usual for a lot of people.
Those are my thoughts too. I mean, even a lot of LCSs, I've seen so many that you know they can. There's different revenue streams for an LCS. Obviously, you've got the wax that sits on your shelves, the unopened product that is often mostly very modern, recently released, and that I kind of think is it's one way to pay your rent and put food on the table. But I think the other way is getting more creative and being like having singles, selling singles. Now, a lot of customers want the gamble. They want to open up a box or a pack and try and hit a great card. But LCS owners that I talk to aren't making a ton of money off the wax. They're making their money either off of Pokemon wax, or they're making it off of having a really good grasp on how to play the singles game. And
Mhm.
I know some that are good at it, and I know some that just don't understand how to play the singles game. So if Fanatics comes in and kind of goes direct to consumer with unopened product, and you no longer can sell baseball, football, basketball cards on your shelf because Fanatics is keeping it all for themselves and selling it directly to your customers, you have to pivot. You have to find a way to do it differently. And I mean, I don't know what that is, but you got to be creative, and maybe it's getting into the singles game, maybe it's aligning with Fanatics somehow. I mean, I'm sure they're going to be. They don't. I don't. I can't see them wanting to wipe out the footprint of LCSs in North America. I mean, to me, that just seems counterproductive. I mean, LCSs are communities. They are places of gathering. They're places of sharing ideas and sharing passion and
Mhm.
sharing approaches for collecting that build the hobby. So I think they have to be smart enough to not want to wipe the LCSs out. Wiping out the distributors in the middle, I can completely understand that.
Yeah.
Unfortunate for the GTSs, and the whoever else is down in the US. Up in Canada, we've got two or three big distributors. Too bad for them, but they can still distribute other things, toys and TCG. So again, I don't really feel sorry for any of these groups, because I would rather just encourage you to adapt, pivot, find
Mhm.
ways. I mean, evolve. The level of evolution is only going to continue to accelerate, I think, as time goes by. So figure it out. I mean,
Yeah.
figure it out. Sounds harsh,
Absolutely.
but
No. But like another important component of the hobby, of course, are like the card shows, uh, which are often produced, or they're often organized by the LCSs of those areas. And so I think both fanatics will probably understand that importance from their standpoint of promoting their future products and things of that nature. And also perhaps more local LCSs will maybe think about those that type of thing, uh, in terms of, maybe not leaning that heavily on it, but they may have to kind of lean a little bit more into that type of thing, like maybe doing more shows or more promotional type of deals, like card shows or satellite setups or things of that nature going forward.
I think it's a good point. I mean, when I think of card shows, I think mostly of the vendors that have the showcases with singles in them, not so much the vendors that are just there selling their unopened product or the wax. Um, so it comes back to, what are you specializing in? Are you special? Because wax is pretty much low margin, outside of the last couple of years. It's a low margin game for the LCSs, remembering that at least one distributor has been there in the middle to take a piece of that margin. So now you're left with lower margin, and it's, 10-15% isn't that great unless you're selling a ton of product. I think you can do better in the singles game, and card shows are about the singles game to me, at least as a customer. Most of the tables at card shows are singles vendors, not unopened product vendors. So,
Hmm.
yeah, your point that some LCS owners can get into the card show promotion game, sure, that's one thing, but you can also become a traveling vendor. You don't
Hmm.
maybe there won't be room for as many LCSs in the future as there are in existence today, and you need to start to work on your online game. You need to work on, maybe you're doing consignments, maybe you're sending cards to consignment sellers to keep your inventory turning over. But I think what I'm kind of thinking about is the similarities between, as an LCS owner, having, upping your singles game in your showcases, uh, along with the card show game of having singles and showcases. There might be some way for them to leverage one from the other.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that people can probably turn to is sort of this evolution that we've had in terms of content creating, and I wanted to go ahead and pivot there and talk about what got you into wanting to do Sports Card Live. How long ago was that you started doing that, and what was the motivation of wanting to start that show?
Well, going back to, it was about February of 2020,
Hmm.
and maybe it was March 2020. I was wanting to sell some graded vintage hockey cards, and I didn't want to go through the eBay process. I do not personally enjoy the eBay process of scanning, listing, and then having to deal with shipping and all that stuff. It's just, not something I enjoy spending time on. So I said to myself, why don't I just go live on a Facebook group and just kind of see if I can do that. So I found there's a vintage hockey card Facebook group. I reached out to the moderators and I said, "Hey, is it okay if I stream live to the group?" Which I think live streaming to Facebook was relatively new back in that month of 2020. And I said, "Do you mind if I do this?" And they said, "Yeah, that's no problem, but don't show anything after 1989." I said, "Okay, no problem." Next night, or whenever it was, a couple nights later, I go live in this Facebook group, and I'm literally just sitting here, like right here, like this, and I'm like, one card. All right, guys, I'm going to show some cards. I'm going to tell you prices. Send me messages if you want them, or we'll get deals done. So I had stacks of cards by decade: 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. All right, here's this card. I'm asking 200. This card I'm asking 300. Blah, etc. One after the other. And I did that for about an hour and a half, and I made a ton of sales. And then I got people messaging me after saying, "That was so much fun. You should do it again." This is before Whatnot and Loop and all these
Yeah.
things. So I don't know if they got that idea from me. I won't take that credit, but I had that idea kind of like before they did even. But anyway, what happened next was I thought, well, now I've got some modern hockey cards that I want to sell. And I can't do them in the vintage group. And there's like a million modern hockey Facebook groups. So how do I pick one? I said, I don't know. I said, maybe I should start a new Facebook group called Sports Cards Live that is for live streaming sales of cards. Little did I know the Whatnot was maybe working on that already. But so I went to Facebook and I created the group, and the name was available. And then my brain started, churning, and I thought, wow, that's a pretty good name. Maybe I'll see if I can get the YouTube channel name. So I went to YouTube and I tried to get the name, and luckily it was available, and I locked it down. And then I wasn't sure what I was going to do. So I had this group, and I started inviting people, and I had some rules, like, you can live stream here and sell cards, and just, all the rules that you would need to put in place. And um, it didn't take off really. Nobody was really live streaming to sell cards. And then I had the idea, well, I'm gonna go live on YouTube, but what am I gonna do? So I wasn't sure. So it was April the 16th, 2020. I went live for the first time, and I just went and I just kind of talked about what I was planning to do with the Facebook group. And I'd have to go back and watch it. It's almost 3 years ago now.
Hmm.
But that was my very first time live streaming. I'd never done it before. Well, there's one exception to that I'll get to in a second. And so went live, talked about it, and at that point I had already talked to Carvin Chung, who was a friend of mine who worked at Upper Deck, Panini, GTS currently. And I said, "Hey, Carvin," and he's the one that invented Exquisite and the Cup and Hockey when he had his time at Upper Deck. Anyway, I said, "Hey, Carvin, I'm going to go live on Saturday. Do you want to come on with me and I'll just interview you?" He's like, "Yeah, sure, let's do it."
Hmm.
So I went live first on Thursday just to get some practice, just myself talking about what I was planning to do, which was just I didn't really know. And then Carvin came on with me on Saturday, and the reason I brought him on is because, well, he was a friend of mine, and he was kind of relatively unknown in social media at the time. But I thought he would help me access both the hockey market and the basketball market, which I was very interested in because he invented Exquisite.
Hmm.
So we went live and had a great time doing the interview, and then I realized, well, I guess I got to find someone to interview next time. And that was really how Sports Cards Live was created. I said a few minutes ago that there was one exception to I'd never gone live before, and that was I think it was that's why I said February before. It was either February or March 2020, um, when I believe the pandemic was just starting to really take off, and maybe even there was starting to be questions whether or not the national was going to happen. And on Instagram, an account by the name of 610 Sports Cards, Justin, he started doing an Instagram card show. And you would just send him a message saying, "Hey, Justin, I'm going to go live on my Instagram, Saturday at 10 a.m." And he would just kind of put together this list and share it with people. And I took advantage of that and I did that. And so this was in addition to that first time I went live in the vintage hockey group, I had also done that. And maybe that's what led me to the Facebook group. I don't remember, but he had a great idea there,
Yeah.
and so it was kind of the culmination of those things that led me to go live and just kind of pivoting it from being a selling idea to an interview show. Yeah.
Well, it seems like you really hit on something. I honestly can't recall if there really were very many interview formatted shows regarding the hobby specifically before I ran into your show on YouTube. Do you think you're one of the first that kind of tapped into that?
There had to have been because there had been podcasts for years, as
Right. Yeah.
we're aware, and I think some podcasts did bring on guests and ask them some questions. One of the inspirations that I had, there's two that three I guess I recall. One is so Drew Herndon. Let me get that potograph. I had seen him doing an interview with somebody. I forget who it was, and I wondered what software he used.
Hmm.
So I think I might have asked him, and he turned me on to StreamYard back in early 2020. And I got to say, without StreamYard, my show, I might have found an alternative, but wouldn't be what it is. I mean, it's such a
Yeah.
great tool, as
Well,
you know.
I was gonna say because of the pandemic, we got a lot of innovation in things like even Zoom, but definitely with StreamYard and Riverside, and now there's several different types of platforms that you can kind of use to do stuff like this that makes it relatively easy for just about anybody to kind of start their own interview channel, and it's been great. But yeah, a lot of that like a lot of innovation, like a lot of things that got impacted by the pandemic, just in terms of prices and buying platforms and social media stuff that people have connected on with the hobby, the platforms to do things like interviews live on the spot and to be able to record them in high quality is has been dramatically different than it was just 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, without these tools, uh, thankfully, it's like they say, war spurns technological innovation. Well, so does a pandemic. So, any of these events can really hurl us forward as a society. So, yeah. So I mean, there was the Let Me Get That Potograph. My other influences were Cardboard Chronicles. He used to do
Mhm.
interview shows that I really enjoyed. I just wanted to kind of maybe take it to the next level with my interactive style. And
Mhm.
then my favorite podcast to listen to, 5 years ago was the House of Jordans. And it's funny
Yeah.
that two of those my influences kind of partnered up and created Card Ladder at the end of the day. But yeah, that's really how I got started. And yeah, I didn't when I started it, Kurt. I was not planning to be an interview show. even when I invited Carvin on the first time, I didn't know that that was gonna be the first episode of now over 300 interviews that I've done. I didn't know that, and I had no experience interviewing. I had no experience in media or journalism or anything like that. I just, I just kept on going. You know, it was just one week at a time, and then it kind of, you know, it still, I don't want to say it blew up. It still hasn't blown up. I don't have a ton of subscribers on YouTube or that kind of thing, but I think that that I do have sophisticated, loyal viewers and listeners
Hmm.
who are really looking to, you know, just um, experience the passion that I have,
Yeah.
and also learn, you know, learn about different hobby approaches and what's going on, because you know my show is about bringing on three different types of guests: industry insiders,
Hmm.
passionate collectors, and other content creators. And the best episodes are where one person is in all three of those groups, you know, or multiple groups. So
Right.
yeah.
No, definitely. Like when you get to have on like Dr. James Beckett, who kind of embodies all three of those really. And but just listening to him talk about the history of the hobby, and not just about his particular company, but just the things that he's collected over the years, and the things that he's still involved with, even though he's no longer involved with Beckett, but the way he's still involved with the hobby nowadays. Just yeah, I mean, being able to talk to people like that, it's such great content for anyone to go and listen to, and really kind of be inspired to, you know, learn more about this hobby and learn more about the people that sort of were involved in the decision making about things that we love collecting nowadays. And you know, just for me in general, just I've always loved learning more about the history of the hobby, not just about the history of the sport itself, but knowing things about the people who kind of made those decisions to create Upper Deck Exquisite and things like that. It's just really fascinating to listen to.
I agree. I One of the most kind of flattering events in my content journey was when I learned that Dr. James Beckett was a fan of mine and was mentioning me on other shows to people and saying, you know, you got to watch this, or he does a great job. I mean, I've heard that he said that about me early on, and like talk about encouragement and like
Mhm.
fueling my fire to continue. Hearing from someone who you idolized without knowing him for so many years, you know, when I got those Beckett magazines in the first ones in the 80s, not knowing that he was a person until you open it up and read that he's the, you know, the editor in chief or whatever. But yeah, and then when I did my 30th episode, which was sometime in 2020, it was very important to me for him to be the guest for my 30th. That was a big milestone episode, and I had to in an emergency basis slip an episode in right before I was going to have him on. It was when a LeBron James RPA sold by Ken Golden for $1.8 million, and I wanted to do a reaction episode to that, and I brought on Carvin Chung, who like invented the card, and
Mhm.
Josh Johnson from Cardboard Chronicles, who owned a copy of the card, to talk about it. So I slipped that in, but I didn't want to call that episode 30. That was reserved for Dr. Beckett. So I called that episode 31, and I did them in reverse order. So episode 31 chronologically took place before episode 30, but I wasn't going to knock Dr. Beckett off of what I felt was an important episode. So yeah, he's someone to definitely you know, just listen to, you know, really take seriously what he says, because he understands the history of the hobby. He's been around so long, and yeah, what a great, he's the godfather as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. So now that you've been doing it for a while, is it relatively like an easy thing for you just to kind of reach out to people and get people on now? I mean, do you seek people out now, or do you just have people like just coming to you, essentially just be like, hey, I really want to come on, and can you fit me in or whatever? Yeah, like, yeah, what is the now that you've gotten to this point where you've done so many episodes and have talked to so many people, what's the process like for you now to turn these episodes out?
Yeah, great question. So originally, of course, had to reach out to people, and then what I started doing was using the national and other card shows as a guest wrangling event for me. I'd go to the national and just talk to people and invite them on. And that's still something that I would do. And I did last year, and I'll continue to do that because you're meeting people.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's really evolved now to where finding guests is very easy. People ask me or come to me, whether it's industry insiders who um, people will also refer. I have this happen regularly. Well, they say, a new business idea, and they may present it to somebody who says, "Oh, well, have you talked to Jeremy Lee yet?" Or,
Mhm.
like very, very like what an interesting position to be in. But so then they'll reach out to me and say, "Hey, here's what I'm doing. Do you want to trial this, or we're doing beta? Do you want to beta it?" And I think they want to come on the show, and I'm all for you know sharing, and people have using Sports Cards Live as a platform to share what they're doing. So that's pretty cool. But as far as like, do I have to go after people? Some people, yeah. I mean, I just had Gary V last
Yeah.
week, and he was somebody that was not easy to get. I had to took a couple years, and even the very beginning of the show, and he, of course, it wasn't a standard episode. All my episodes have been live. He's the only episode I've done that wasn't live as far as
Mhm.
an interview goes, because he had 15 minutes to allocate to me on Monday at 3 o'clock. So that's not when I want to go live, but I worked with what I had. We did the interview, and I dropped it on a Thursday night at my usual time. So, well, my usual time is usually Saturday, but we dropped it on Thursday. But I had sent him an email a couple times. I reached out to him on Instagram, no reply. Understandable. I mean, the guy's got 10 million followers. I'm sure
Yeah.
he doesn't get to his inbox.
He's a
But
little busy. Yeah. No.
yeah, and he's running a 2,000 person marketing organization, so I understand it. But at the National in Atlantic City last year, I had bought a card from him at the National in 2019, and he remembered that. I remember, and not really kind of knew who he was, but didn't totally. And I bought a Kevin McHale rookie card from him, and I remember him saying to his partner or his brother at the booth, he said, "I like this guy," and I thought, "Oh, that's kind of cool. This guy likes me. Great, you know." Maybe I won't grind him as hard on the price for the card. But so that was 2019. 2021 National, I ran into him, and at the hotel one night, group of people standing around chatting, and he was there, and he knew who I was, remembered me from that event, from buying a card. Maybe had seen me on a couple of my shows. But I said to him, I went to his booth a couple days later at the show. I said, "Hey, Gary, I do Sports Cards Live, and I've had on all these people. I'd love to have you on, and I've been wanting to get you on for a couple of years now." He says, yeah, we'll get it done by the end of the year. Just email me. So I did, and then finally, a couple months after emailing me, his people got back to me, and we arranged it, and finally got it done. So I will chase people that I really want to get on the show, but I can't. I feel like at this point, um, I've had like everybody on the show that I'm interested in having on. I shouldn't say that. I've had a lot of the industry insiders on that I want to have on. I'll never run out of collectors to have on my show. Passionate collectors. Those are the best episodes anyway.
Right.
So but yeah, it's certainly gotten easier, and my pipeline is full. Like I people like I feel bad. Somebody wants to come on or has to cancel. I can't get you on for 3 months now. Like that's how scheduled in advance I am.
Well, and it was great that you got to have Gary Vee on for sure. And I feel like, I mean, that had to be one of his first interviews he's done regarding the hobby, strictly about the hobby, the sports card hobby, in quite some time. And obviously, with all the other things he's got going on with his businesses, it was really interesting to finally get to hear from him for the first time. What felt like forever. I felt like it was at least like maybe a couple of years since we had really Gary Vee talking even for 15 minutes about his thoughts on the hobby.
Yeah, I think it was. And what was interesting afterwards, and I didn't anticipate it, I probably should have, was there were a bunch of reaction videos that came out to my interview with him. One of them had more views than my episode did, or at least it did at the time. It probably still does. Dustin at Sports Card Dad, his reaction video had more views than the actual interview did, but he's also got like 4 times the subscribers that I do, so it's understandable. But yeah, it was I believe his first time, and I think people were glad to hear from him. And I think he's been involved in the hobby. He's obviously
Yeah.
busy. He doesn't have as much time for it as I do. I'm sure. I'm not running a 2,000 person company, but yeah, it was definitely a highlight for me, just because of his level of influence, and I don't mean it by what I mean is the amount of his notoriety, to get some,
Yeah.
like I posted it. I posted a small clip of it to my personal Facebook page, and people from all areas of my life are like, "Oh, how cool is this?" My uncle, who's a doctor in Philadelphia, put a, "I'm proud of my nephew for getting Gary V." Like, people were so impressed that have nothing to do with sports cards, and I didn't anticipate that either. So that was really cool to hear from people from the throughout my life that saw this and thought it was really cool. Like, he's got notoriety in not just sports or the hobby, obviously. So yeah, he was a big guest to get, and like I had his name on my wall. I've got names on my wall right there. I've got there's 12 of them, people that are on my current like list that are have either reached out to me that I need to schedule still, and it was just great to take his name off the wall after so long.
Yeah. Well, two quick thoughts. One, it's nice of you to be able to create content for other content creators. No. And that is sometimes the game of putting yourself out there and creating content is you kind of inadvertently are a part of that now. But second of all, say what you want about Gary Vee. There are a lot of people that are in this hobby right now because of Gary Vee and his reach and his opinions on his platforms. And so, like I said, you can have your opinions on him, that's understandable, but you can't deny, like, I think his opinion still matters to a lot of people. And you're right, I think there's still people that are well beyond the reach of sports cards that listen to Gary Vee, and I think that it's still important to hear from him at least from time to time. And you have a good wide variety of guests very similar to Gary Vee, I would say, that you've had on, that I would say it's important to get their aspects of the hobby, because they're putting all kinds of money into all kinds of different assets. And they often have, I'm trying to think, is it Patrick David Ray, or how do you say his name? I'm sorry, that you've had on several times. I really enjoy his interviews that you've had with him, because he has he has assets in just about everything. And so to hear his take on the sports cards and the trajectory of what he feels like they're going to do every time you have him on, I think is still important for people to listen to.
Yeah, you're talking. I think you're talking about Patrick Bet David.
Yeah, Patrick Bet David.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I had Patrick Bet David on the show, I believe, in early 2021, just
Hmm.
one time.
Okay.
But I think I've done some clips that have come out since then. Yeah,
Hmm.
um, so yeah, I mean, having on like he's a huge influencer as well, notoriety. I mean, he's interviewed everybody like Kobe Bryant to mafia lords to Russian spies. I mean, this guy, he's probably like got the second best roster of interviewees, as far as podcast goes, to like Joe Rogan. So it goes Joe
Yeah.
Rogan, Patrick Bet David, Jeremy Lee. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Uh, but Patrick Bet David was somebody who was a big get for me, the biggest until Gary Vee, I would say. But something that I took from Patrick Bet David, in addition to just having him on to talk about sports cards, because he's a collector investor and he's had some big cards, I also studied his interview style. And again, I said earlier in the show, Kurt, I have no experience interviewing at all, no experience in media journalism, anything. And so I studied Patrick Bet David's interview style before I had him on so that I could use it with him. And he actually gave me, at the very end of that episode, he gave me an amazing compliment. He said that my interview style was excellent and my ordering of questions was wonderful. And I didn't tell him, but it's like, well, thank you, Patrick Bet David, because I kind of studied you a little bit. And that was a big, again, another one of those moments for me that made me realize, maybe I'm onto something here. Let's keep on going and, just not stop. Keep on being consistent. When you're doing content, I've learned that I have them written down. Educate, inspire, and entertain are three of the things that I try to always do. But on top of that, you have to be authentic. You have authenticity and consistency. And if you can, especially for for a sponsored content creator like myself, I get paid by several hobby entities at this point in time, like 5 or 6 of them. And it's so important to remain authentic throughout that, to maintain your audience and maintain the trust your audience has for you. So I do my best to balance out being paid with being authentic. But above all, I think, not above all, I think it's as important to be consistent with your content. And so my advice to content creators are those: be authentic, be
Mhm.
passionate, be consistent, and then educate, inspire, and entertain. And if you can kind of keep all those things top of mind, you should be successful.
Yeah, great. Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely agree with that for sure. So I'm curious now, what life is like for you now that you've been doing your channel now for several years. You're a pretty prominent person in the hobby, it seems like. What has that led to for you now, and what's life like now for you in terms of, are you still collecting on a regular basis, and how much time do you have to give to yourself, or to give to, just your sort of your needs in terms of trying to collect for fun and things of that nature,
Well, I mean, I had to quit my job. Let's start there. To open up time for me to properly attend to what I refer to as my 3 pillars in the hobby. I
Hmm.
needed to retire from my career. I say that kind of being funny, but I did. I did retire from my 25-year CPA career. When I mention these 3 pillars, they are simply my content. They are
Hmm.
tag
Hmm.
grading, which is a role I have, and managing my collection, being a collector, curating and buying, and also being a card show vendor. So that's where all my time goes to now. I guess I'm fortunate I was able to retire from my career because I do earn income from my content, and it's decent. Like it's enough. I also have a role with tag grading where I'm the VP of business development, and we're still gearing up our capacity. So that hasn't really kicked into being like a full-time role yet, but it will, like in the next few months, as we're fully scaled. And then there's just being a collector. Like you asked, am I still collecting? Yeah, I mean, it's at the end of the day, it all comes. The hobby to me is all about the cards and the people, but you always have your. I love my cards, and I'm always curating my collection, adding cards. I'm buying cards all the time, and so yeah, I have 2 young kids, and my wife and I both work from home now, and so we're fortunate that way. Get to spend time with my kids. I can take them to school, pick them up, that sort of thing, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
Versus only seeing them for an hour before bed every day. So yeah, I mean that's what's keeping me busy is sports cards live. I do a show for Collectible. I do a show for PWCC. Um, I'm actually just a this is really cool, Kurt. I started doing my auction coverage shows, the PWCC live shows, uh,
Yeah.
2 years ago, and that led to a deal with PWCC. And I've had 2 other companies reach out to me asking me if would you do a live show for our auction. One of them was a direct competitor of PWCC, so I didn't take that job. But another one is a non-competitor in a different space. So for the first time on
Hmm.
February the 19th, I will be live covering LCG auctions, which is an auction house for collectibles like action figures, video games, some comic books, VHS tapes, things that are very nostalgic for me. And as I was reviewing their auction last night, I'm like, oh, this is going to be fun because and I pulled out my box of Star Wars figures because
Yeah.
I have them. I mean, I collected action figures throughout my life, so I'm excited to learn more about what they're doing and to broaden my horizons as a content creator. What a cool opportunity that is. So pretty excited for that.
No, absolutely. That does sound exciting. I mean, yeah. I mean, I would say if you are discussing auction results, I mean, there's so many auction sites now, of course, just for sports cards, really. But yeah, if you go into the other collectibles categories, it's could probably be overwhelming. But that is interesting to kind of look at auction results for different types of collectibles, the comic books, the graded retro video games, things of that nature that have kind of gone through a crazy trajectory, very similar to sports cards these past couple of years. There's been a lot of talk about it with various different content creators that are very specific to those genres. So yeah, so for you to kind of look at those results and to do that with what you see with PWCC results as well, I think that would definitely be very interesting to look at.
Interesting and expensive. I can just see myself, yes, I'm going to earn some money from providing this service, but I think I might spend more because I'm seeing things that are so cool that are like I'm a collector. It runs through my blood, and not just of sports cards. Like I'm prone to collecting lots of different things because I had lots of interest as a kid, and the nostalgic buzz in me, it's strong. It's very strong. So I guess I just really yearn back to those years of no real life responsibility, and just I love, like, the 80s and 90s are my most nostalgic periods. And that, let's face it, the what was going on in for us back then, like pre-internet, in terms of sports and cards and music and television and video games and action figures that were tied into music and television and video games, movies. I mean, that's yeah. So on LCG auctions, I'm afraid that I'm going to spend more than I was planning. But hey, it's fun, and hopefully when you spend, it's a it's an one thing in collecting, Kurt, is, for all of us, I think, is, if you know anything about accounting, and you know that you've got a balance sheet and an income statement, they're two different
Mhm.
financial statements. So when you spend money, you can either put that on your income statement as an expense or on your balance sheet as an asset. Those are two different ways of accounting for expenditures. And I like to put things on my balance sheet. So if you're breaking product and just that you get nothing in return for it, or very little, that's an expense, right? Your supplies are an expense. But if you're buying a card for your collection that's worth significant money to you, whether it's $100 or 1,000, I put that on my balance sheet. So
Mhm.
if I'm gonna be buying a new class of collectible, I want to I want to preserve those funds. I don't want to just write them off, which is what you do on your income statement. I'd rather add them to my balance sheet. So what I'm getting at is, hopefully whatever money I might spend on LCG's platform on February the 19th will be, an investment as well as a collectible.
So you'll be talking and bidding at the same time, is what you're telling us.
We'll see. Oh man, we'll see. We'll see. I'm prone to it.
So let's talk about some of the things that you do have in your collection that are the most fun to you or you're most proud of having. I know you're a big relic autograph collector in hockey. Yeah, what are some of the things that you are just the most proud of having, and things that maybe you've added recently that you're really excited about?
Oh man, I mean, I love so many different types of cards. I love my Hall of Fame rookie card collection that I've been working on for decades now. All four main sports. Um, I don't consider soccer a main sport. Not to get under anyone's skin, but that's just for me. It's not something I collect. But so, like, proud wise, and I can actually answer both of your kind of timing issues there with something I've had for a while, something I just got. So I have my 1951 Bowman Mickey Mantle rookie card that I bought in like 2007 or 2008, very impulsively. Probably paid more than I should have, but now it's worth way more than what I paid, so that's pretty cool. But so I got my 51 Bowman Mickey Mantle, and then just last year I bought its pairing card, the 51 Willie Mays.
Mhm.
So I bought my Willie Mays in 2022. I bought my Mickey Mantle in 2008, and now to me they're a nice pairing. Very proud of those two cards. I love them both very much. I'm also very proud of my complete set of 1910 C56 hockey cards. That's the first set ever of hockey cards. They're tobacco cards. They look a lot like the T206s, but we call them the C56s. And so I'm very proud of that set. I've had it for I've had it for over 15 years. I've upgraded a few cards over the years. I think it, and they're all PSA graded. I believe the grade point average is like 4.0 something, maybe 4.1. So a really nice set there that I have in the Vezina card, which is the anchor of the card, and one of the, it's kind of a grail for hockey card collectors. It's a PSA 5, a very nice 5. So I'm very proud of that. I love my Jackie Robinson 48 Leaf rookie with all my heart. It's a very off-centered PSA 6, but I still love it. And I've got modern cards too.
Yeah.
I've got a Precious Metal Gems Green Wayne Gretzky. I love my Ken Griffey Jr. Rubies from 1997, I think it is. Love that card. I could go on and on, Kurt. I love. It's like I hate when people ask if you could only keep one card, which one would it be? I'm like, no, zero cards
No.
at that point. At that
Yeah.
point, I keep zero. Um,
No.
I have about 1,000 cards that I could answer that question with that I just love, and so yeah, I'll just have to leave it at that. Otherwise, I'll keep on rambling.
No, that's fine. No, yeah, I know it's always hard for people to choose like one or two of their favorites. So I always like getting a general sense of what they have in their collection that they're like most. Well, I use the term most proud because to me, I think that's why we do this. We love sort of the pride we feel inside when we finally are able to assemble either a set or just a grouping of cards that we've always wanted to have in our collection ever since we were a kid, or whatever. So yeah, I just love listening to people's sort of general general you know description of what they have that they just love having. It's never just one or two cards. It's usually like a general group or general collection, and it's always interesting to hear about different collectors, the collection that they've assembled over the years.
Listen, Kurt, I want to ask you a favor.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I use that question at times? I love the question. I love how you worded it. It's, not if you could only keep one.
Right.
What are you most proud of in your collection? That's such a great question because it allows you to really go through and not have to isolate only one, you know. Yeah, I hope you don't mind if I ask some of my guests that question as I go forward.
Absolutely, feel free to. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I think that's kind of a good point to start to end this interview. Is there anything else you want to make sure to mention? We talked a lot about your channel, but you're on lots of platforms, obviously, and like you said, you're starting to get involved with lots of different hobby entities out there. So, are there things you want to make sure to plug or to mention that you're kind of really into right now or really passionate about at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very right now, and into the future. I'm very passionate about tag grading. I mean, I think and by let me just qualify that by saying I'm an investor. I'm also, I'm a vice president of the company. That all came as a result of Sports Cards Live. Without that, I wouldn't have had those opportunities. But I think that the hobby is ripe for some more consistent, accurate, and transparent grading, and that's what Tag endeavors to do. And we will be really fully launched we're aiming for like June, July. We've
Okay.
been very controlled on our intake of cards as we make sure our system is doing the best work it can. We're doing a ton of quality assurance and we're improving some of our processes still. So I'm very passionate about tag grading. I think it's the future of grading. So there's that. And then if I'm going to plug things, the PWCC Premier Auction is my favorite night of the month. Well, the third Thursday usually of every month, I go live with Adam Gray, who this is a funny story, Kurt, just what things can lead to. But I brought Adam Gray on as a co-host of my live auction coverage shows, and he did such a great job that they ended up hiring him based
Yeah.
on what they saw on them sponsoring my show. So Adam and I still continue to co-host that show together. We'll be doing it again on the 16th of February this month, covering the Premier Auction, and that's a lot of fun. And I just started covering on Sundays their hockey auction and their weekly, the hockey category of their weekly auctions, with
Mhm.
another, I brought on Josh Madigan of the Hockey Cards Gong Show as my co-host for that. So we're having fun with that. And then, check out LCG auctions, not sports cards, but something that I'm super excited to do. I can't wait to do this show, especially after I dove deep into because it just went live. I dove deep into the lots last night. So there's that. And then I do Collectible Live on Sundays at 7 o'clock Eastern, or we'll do it on a Monday or Tuesday. Just depends on when the guest is available. But that's, kind of a show that I got hired to do about a year and a half ago. And we bring on different guests. Like this past Sunday, we brought on a guy who's a fine wine expert and talked about the collectability and investability of wine. Again, I use it as an opportunity to learn about another category, and that was a lot of fun. So yeah, thanks for the opportunity to talk about what I'm doing and to plug those things. But those are kind of my the main things that I'm working on and I enjoy doing.
Absolutely. Well, like I said, if you're not already subscribed to Jeremy's channel, shame on you. Go subscribe. Go back and watch all of his interviews. They're all terrific. It's once again Sports Card Live. Jeremy, thank you so much for taking the time to do this one more time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Kurt. As do I. Thanks for having me on.